speaking of Brian Eno, and one of the people that we've had on the podcast recently was Simon Phillips, who
Yeah,
was a bandmate of yours in
yeah,
801. And I, I had a 2 hour conversation with Simon, and Simon's got an incredibly historied career with all the great artists he's worked with.
yeah.
But one of the things I really wish I had more time and I would have asked him about was 801, because I think it's such a fascinating project. The music is incredible. And as far as I understand it, it's again another kind of Eno conceptual type thing. Um, what was the groundwork for 801, and what were kind of the rules? And like, I mean, is the I guess the mythology is true as people saying, like, were there just these rules? You guys knew it was just going to be like a 6 week band, and that was it. I mean, was it really that? I guess is are the stories true? I guess is my question.
Well, that is totally true. Yeah, I mean, uh, the other two people involved in the conceptual idea of 801 were the McCormick brothers. Bill McCormick, the bass player who plays on 801 now, who had been playing with Robert Wyatt before, and his brother Ian MacDonald, who was actually called Ian, really Ian McCormick, but as Ian MacDonald wrote a famous book on the Beatles called Revolution in the Head, and also was the assistant editor of the New Musical Express in England in the 1970s. And I've been at school with those McCormick brothers. And the four of us went away to a cottage in Wales and came up with this idea for a project. And to be honest, I think, looking back and making sense of it, it was a bit like an art project of he knows or something, but those brothers totally developed it with us, the four of us, that they would be a band that would last only 6 weeks, would put three people who were very technical against three people who hated technique, and would work on some songs together, would do like 4 or 5 concerts, and then disappear into the ether. And had no idea whether it would work or not. So we embarked on this project. I think we had about 6 gigs arranged. In the end, three of them dropped out. So we only had 3 gigs. One was a tiny club in Norfolk, which is on the east coast of England, which we went to because it was so difficult to get to. We thought, well, we can go and play there. No one will know. We can try out this thing. And then the next one was called the Reading Festival, which was a big blues festival, rock and jazz and blues festival in Reading, which still is going. And the other one was at the Queen Elizabeth Hall, which we recorded. So we only played 3 times. We rehearsed, though, for 6 weeks. And we experimented we wanted to use some of Eno's songs, some of my songs, and a couple of covers. So we chose, in the covers, we chose probably the most difficult cover you could ever try and imagine to do, which is Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles. Because as we know, that was just a studio construct of loops and things that were amazing. When the Beatles had stopped touring and they started using the studio as an instrument, basically, and they came up with all these wonderful, not only wonderful avant-garde sounds, but also combined that with their great melodies and great words and things like that. And Lennon's words, incredible. So, but we decided to play that live, and so that had some of Eno's pre-recorded tapes playing at the same time as us playing, but on the technical side, we had this incredible drummer who was only 18 at the time, Simon Phillips. Now, still, if I listened, you could listen to the 801 live album just for the drum part. If you listen to the drum, it is a tour de force. And no wonder Simon Phillips has become one of the most famous drummers in the world at the moment, played with so many incredible people, because he is fantastic and was fantastic then. And after that gig, he got so many offers to play, whether it's Jeff Beck, all the jazzers, Mick Jagger, you name it, Pete Townsend, everybody, after hearing that album, hired Simon. So, you know, I was very proud that we recognized his talent then. And it goes, it is the, and incidentally, we are going to bring out in 2026 the 50th anniversary version with some tracks that people have never heard of from the sound check at of the recording, which is great because if you know the 801 live album, you'll hear maybe different versions of it because all the soloing was improvised, so it'd be like a different version of it. So, and a couple of tracks that didn't end up on the album because when it first came out on vinyl, you couldn't get that much information out on vinyl with the limitations of the technology. So that's going to be very exciting, and we're starting to work on that. Um, but yeah, it's the one project which, whenever it's mentioned or I put something on social media, everybody comes out of the woodwork and says, "Well, I like that album." That's what and then it's great. Of course, Eno never looks backwards. It's a big thing is that I never look backwards at that. So I'd never do anything like that again. But I have used some of that material and played. I did a thing at Ronnie Scott's and we played some of those. In fact, it's the most viewed on my YouTube channel, where I played East of Asteroid at Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club about 10 years ago. And it's the most viewed track on. So we're going to actually do the whole of that Ronnie Scott's set on in Dolby Atmos next year. It'll come out.
Oh man! First off, cannot wait for the 50th anniversary of that. Congratulations! And yeah, that was a very strange record because um, it's one where I think on first listen you go, "This is okay. This is a little out there," and then little parts of it start coming back into your head, and then you're like, I guess I'll give it another shot. And then I think by the third listen, it becomes your favorite record because it is just like it's one of those records where it just grows on you. You're just like, man, there's that one part in Tomorrow Never Knows, I really like, and there's all these different and it's also a really great record. I feel like to listen to straight through. Like it's such a vibe. It goes in all sorts of different places. I love it. It's one of the most. I discovered that record when I was doing research for the Simon Phillips podcast, and I just immediately like became one of my most listened to records. It's such a great record.
Yeah, it's the other thing that it got a lot of you know reasons why people liked it was because we up until then live albums had been recorded very much so they sounded like live albums. You'd have some mics out in the audience and everything. We just decided, you know what, let's just close mic everything. So the actual recording quality was incredible, and bizarrely, people hadn't heard albums like that, and so it got. That's why it still sounds like amazing. I mean, at the time we had done a Roxy live album called Viva Roxy Music, and it sounds like the live albums from that period. But I'm sure if we'd close mic'd it, so that was quite innovative, just by happenstance. It wasn't a great conceptual thing. We thought, oh, let's just do that. Yeah.
A couple questions I have about 801 is I guess the main one being like you said you had 6 weeks of rehearsals. What do those rehearsals look like? Like what I mean, obviously you bring in 3 trained musicians, quote unquote, versus 3 untrained musicians. That's a pretty interesting way of going about things, especially when, we were just talking about, when you choose your projects, you really want to work with talented people. I'm not saying they're not talented, but I've been in situations where I've been one of the more talented people in the group and someone else is just not holding their own, or not as technical. So I guess how did those rehearsals go?
Well, they were challenging, yeah, and we knew they would create this tension. Um, so here's an example. The track East of Asteroids in 13/8. It's the time. So it's not used. He's the anti-musician. He's the anti-technical, the main person of the anti-technique people. So getting him to play his synth on the first beat of the 13/8 was very difficult. No, 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 the wrong thing. The wrong thing. He said, "Well, that's why I hate technical players." It's like, so there was a lot of that. But luckily, we got through it with good humor. But there were a lot of challenging things, and the Lloyd Watson, who's like basically a blues guitarist, slide blues guitarist, he'd won the Blues Artist of the Year, and then him to be thrown into a band with playing like virtually pro rock. But he did incredibly well, and his little additions with his bluesy type slide and stuff like that just like added to the whole thing, and his voice as well, um, gelling with Eno's and stuff like that. Yeah, so it was challenging. We knew it was going to be challenging, and that it was an experiment to see whether those two different opposing kind of people could work together. And we had no expectations. We're doing this, and it's going to go from A to B, and then it's poof, it's going to never happen again. So, don't worry, lads. There's only 4 more weeks of this, and we did it. Island Records used to have a rehearsal room at the back of their offices in St. Peter's Square, and so we were all stuck in this little place there. But we knew we had the dates coming up, so there was no way out of it. We had to do it.
But on the day to day, were you guys? I mean, how many hours a day were you guys practicing writing? I mean, were you guys just like holed up in a cabin? I mean, how did that work?
No, it was a nice small little studio. St. Peter's Square is a lovely part of London. It's still there. In fact, it's just behind that little room is where Mark Knopfler has his studio now, British Grove studio. Lovely. It's a lovely spot. And no, it was used by island artists as a little rehearsal space. So we did some Roxy stuff there. I did something with Steve Winwood and Stomy Yamashita, uh, Mike Street. We did a project there, rehearsed before we played the Albert Hall and stuff like that. No, it was great.
And then how did you guys, obviously you had a little bit of success, Eno had some success. How did you guys choose Simon Phillips as a drummer? Because that seems like such a wild card, but it obviously worked out great because, obviously he's one of the most recognized drummers in the world now. But how did Simon Phillips end up on your radar?
Well, because when we recorded the Roxy albums up at Air Studios, there were in the early 70s there was a big session scene in London. So there's people going around doing sessions. They could make money from doing sessions, guitarists, drummers. And Simon appeared on that circuit, and someone said, "Well, there's a young guy called Simon Phillips. He's fantastic. Why don't you give him a try?" And so actually, Simon, he wasn't used to being in bands. So I said to him, "Look, this is a band. We're going to share everything equally." He said, "No, no, I want session fee." I said, "No, but Simon, you don't understand. This will be a band. You'll get a cut of the thing. It might, okay, it might not earn any money. He's used to having session fees." I had to sort of persuade him, but he was young then, and I think also he had played, if I'm not wrong, on a session for the original Jesus Christ Superstar album, um, which had a lot of heavy rock, well, not heavy rock, but sort of Deep Purple type people and all sorts of things. So he came very well recommended. And when he turned up with his double bass drum, we said, "Oh Christ, drum! I don't have we got room in this tiny little van for a double bass drum kit?" He insisted, and thank God he did, because you listen to those, just the bass drum parts on 801 Live. Bloody hell, it's like fantastic.